North-South Connection. Welcome to NoSo Countdown, number 2, the NWA Great American Bash Tour, July 4th, 1987. Shawn Kidd, what is going on, buddy?
What is going on, Ryan? My debut on video, by the way. So first time for everything, I guess.
I love it. I love it.
Yep.
So you wore your good Under Armour hat for the video, I see. We appreciate that.
Same hat I've worn for a long time. It's my go-to hat.
I'm glad you got the joke.
I got the joke.
All right. Shawn, let's kind of just jump into why this is number 2 on our list. As you know by now, this is just like a kind of a culmination of my ideas of kind of molding all this together. Chad's influences, Dave's influences, and then Cage Match influences also. But let's start with Cage Match. Cage Match gave this a 7.87 out of 10. Meltzer gave it 5. Chad Campbell gave it 4.75. And Chad and JT had this second out of 13 NWA and WCW War Game tier list maker that they made 6 months ago, whatever. So, Shawn, how do you kind of feel about that as we kind of jump right into this?
Well, okay, so I'm just going to throw it out there right away.
Okay, set the table, buddy.
Chad and I are on the same page as far as what he rated this match. However, I'll wait till later on to talk about why this match should be number 1 and not number 2. And we'll talk about that as we get into it, just to throw a little curveball there.
I love it. All right, cool. Actually, believe it or not, Cage Match a little low on this compared to a lot of other ones, especially recent day NXT ones that I felt that were overblown and not very memorable. I don't know why Cage Match was so harsh on this one with a 7.87 or whatever.
Cage Match is interesting. Like they'll be high on something and low on something, and everybody else is high on something. So Cage Match, I don't 100% go by usually. Yeah. I might use it as my guide to figure out if I'm going to watch something or not. But for the most part, I don't go by Cage Match for the most part. But
no, absolutely, nothing's perfect. But I see that as a flaw, as in where, even myself, I'm like an NXT WWE mark, like out on my sleeve. Absolutely, no harm, no foul. And just those matches are not better than this match that I watched today. It's not even close.
It's also different generation. It's generational, right? So, this is 87. NXT is current day. Match, it's whatever you prefer, really. And honestly, it could be whoever's watching the match and who's giving the ratings at the bottom and who's actually talking about the match. Are they a generational or are they modern day wrestling fans? It could be Logan Crossland for because he's an NXT guy. So it could be him doing the Cage Match ratings on that. So
a bunch of German Logan Crosslands. That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it could happen. I mean, we all have doppelgangers somewhere.
I love it. All right, Shawn, what brought us to July 4th, 1987? What's a quick build on why this War Games was so friggin' ramped up and ready to go? Why is this? What's going on in Crockett 1987?
This is a hard one to go quickly on because in theory, I guess one of the reasons why I like this one so much is the build itself. Like for me, for match quality, I include the build in how I view matches. Yeah. And from a War Games perspective, this one has pretty much been built better, probably for the most part. I mean, we're in 87. If you go back to 1980, and again, allow me to be the old guy for a minute, right? 1980, Ole Anderson and Dusty Rhodes had a big feud. There was this heel turn, whatever. You could almost go back to this started back then. But then as you get into 85 and Ric Flair, there's a cage match and Ric Flair and the Anderson turn on Dusty in the cage. So basically I would say the build of this overall has really been going on for 2 years because the Horsemen started at that time and then the build and build and build. And to give you context of what's going on here in 87, obviously Nikita was just added recently to the face side because of what happened with Magnum TA, right? So he went into this face run. But here in 87, Flair is actually feuding with Jimmy Garvin over Precious. And they have this big cage match coming up. Tully and Dusty are getting ready to go into Bash, and they're doing these barbed wire ladder matches. Luger and Nikita, Luger's new to the Horsemen. Luger and Nikita are getting ready to go into this cage match over the U.S. title. Arn is kind of like in this limbo spot right now. Like he doesn't really have much to do, but I think Barry Windham is who he's feuding with because Barry Windham just won this Western States whatever title for the UWF. Yeah, so he's going after that title. And then, it's kind of like he's biding his time till him and Tully decide to be a tag team and go for the Rock and Roll Express. So a lot's going on here. And even with JJ and Paul, right? So they've been going back and forth as managers. And then the Road Warriors, they're going to add the Road Warriors. For the most part in 87, the Road Warriors have just been going to Japan and coming back and wrestling preliminary matches, but you're going to throw them into War Games. So the whole thing is for the build, this is multi-year structure and kind of not like, this has been going on for a few weeks. This is going on a month. For me, I feel like this is ultimately like the end game of a big feud, the way it's designed to be. That's kind of a short term of it, I guess.
Awesome. So you set the table pretty good. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is the first ever War Games. In 1987 and 1988, there was a Great American Bash tour pretty much for the month of July or maybe a little bit therefore after. And this is the actual first one in the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. Am I correct?
100 the first one. Yes, 100%. First one.
This was propped up to be the match beyond the match, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the War Games. Did you think that ceiling was a little too low there, especially towards the end as we get to the finish? But that just felt kind of low.
It's low, but if you go back to 1991, I would say 91 was lower with the Pillman. So I would say that whole Pillman spot where he ate shit from Sid in the 91 one, I feel like that one's shorter. But this one's like right there with it almost. It's like very, very similar, especially when you look at the end. When we get to the end of the match, it looks pretty savage because of how low it is, but it's pretty bad. Yeah. Plus, you got to have Dusty walk the cage, right? So Dusty like literally walks the rope, and Dusty Rhodes is not going to be able to do that unless he can hold himself up,
Here's the thing. My license says 5'8", and if I think a ceiling is low, we got some problems, right?
I don't disagree. It's definitely a low ceiling for sure.
All right, but they do a great job setting the table here. Horseman's entrance, prestige. The crowd is ramped up, ready to go, and just the vibes, as the kids would say, Sean, are fucking rampant, wild. The crowd's not really sure what they're going to get, as this is the first one, but they brought the energy and set the table greatly. And just in the Horseman entrance alone, I love Flair leading the way, just stoic, confident, and ready for war. You know what I mean? He just rules.
Yeah, the thing with Crockett crowds in general, like they were this loud. Like, if you ever watched, like, obviously I did a podcast on Crockett, right? But any match or any show they're on, the crowds are ridiculous. Like, they'll watch like this preliminary match and you won't be able to hear a damn thing that's going on. So something like this for them, this is a big deal. Like, you could sneeze at a Crockett show and it would be loud. But this adds to it because of the dynamics of this match. And the people that went to Crockett shows, they love their Crockett wrestling. And the people that watch Crockett know the end game of what this is about, which probably adds to that dynamic quite a bit. So
now, is Atlanta, just to veer off just a little bit, is Atlanta or Greensboro really kind of would be considered the home for Crockett?
All right, I'm going to share my old again. So Crockett would be the Carolinas, but before Crockett, you had Georgia Championship Wrestling, which Crockett bought or ended up merging with, and their primary home was the Omni in Atlanta. So I think you have both ends of the spectrum. I think you could say Atlanta and the Carolinas are probably equal ground for them at this point.
Okay, just setting the table there. And then we got Dusty's team coming out. I'm sure that the song that I was listening to was maybe revamped a little bit, but I still felt it. I was ready for this. He just looked off. First of all, I'm not surprised at all that they put Grandpa Arn in there to start. That's just a rule, it seems like.
Grandpa Arn was very young in this match, by the way. He just internally looks 80. That's all.
The tights were a little weird too, but we'll get into that. But were surprised that Dusty went in there, but this is his match. He kind of has to.
Listen, just the whole start, like with the even the announcer, like how gritty as his voice got when he did the announcement, or like that was really badass. The other thing with this is that's really cool. JR, okay, and you might not know this. JR was not really in the NWA. He was a UWF announcer. So this is one of his first like shows in WCW. So to add him with Tony just adds to this. And then obviously the flashy lights, the pageantry, like you brought up, just adds to it. The grittiness of the cage. Like I think it was one of the shows you guys did previously where you talked about, the camera angles were really good. Guess what? I don't want the camera angles in the ring. I want the angles outside the cage like we get here because it kind of adds to the grid a little bit. And I think they do a pretty good job in that of this match. But yeah, as far as Dusty starting, Arn I get because Arn is a workhorse no matter what. But Dusty starting this match and knowing how long it's going to go seemed odd to me. But I kind of relate Dusty in the NWA to like Hulk Hogan. Like, Hogan's got a pose, right? Dusty's got an elbow. So it kind of makes sense why he started. Yeah. Dusty's got an elbow. So did it surprise me? Yes, because I thought he'd be last. But you know what? It had a nice little surprise for me because I didn't think Dusty would go in at number one. So it was good.
Yeah, I felt that it was, it's his match, it's his creation. He's gonna go out there and set the bar for the boys in a way. That's kind of how I took it. But I love the energy with him and Arn, and of course Arn is bleeding like a sieve before the next competitor comes in. And here we go, Tommy Young with the double-sided head coin, right? So
By the way, the coins are always interesting in war games because I'm trying to remember, I think 90% of the time the heels always win. So that
yeah,
gimmick is kind of dead, but I think it's almost a rib at this point. So you're always going to see the face get double teamed. You're not going to usually see the heel get double teamed by two faces. So it's
yeah.
interesting.
And then some weirdos will complain if it goes the other way, and then the other weirdos will complain that it's always predictable. It is what it is, boys.
It should be that way. The heels
Yeah,
it should be faces against the heels first. I'm 100% on board with that. So
for sure. But anyways, like we said, Tommy Young flips the double-sided coin. Spoiler: the heels wins here, and I just love Tully coming in, a chicken with his head cut off, ready to fucking rock and roll. A little trip on the rope, but I'm not mad at him on that. He was ready to roll. What did you think of Tully jumping in here?
listen, I love this whole energy with Dusty from the start, and he just basically whips Arn's ass, and then Tully comes in, and they get Dusty down fast, and then they go after the leg. And what's really cool about that is the leg. It's a big story around Dusty's leg from '85, where he had this like boot and all this shit. So this is so they're basically playing on Dusty's infamous. It's kind of like Bob Orton with his cast, right? This is kind of like
Yeah.
the same thing with Dusty's leg. But I just thought it was great. And, what was really cool is when Dusty started bleeding, his blonde hair is just chock full of blood. And it's just fantastic. And then Arn and Tully just take a straight ass kicking at the same time. So it's just really good back and forth between all three. Good shine for Dusty, but at the same time, I don't think it was too much shine that it eclipsed what the heels were doing to him. So I thought it was pretty good.
He had it was well paced with his hope spots too. You know what I mean? Just
I
enough
agree.
for kind of a mix of both of that. But then literally Animal comes in like a fucking little animal. I thought he looked great. I thought it was good pick to have Animal come in, the powerhouse, really even the odds, and just let him shine with less guys in the ring.
With Animal, there was a good spot where you had like Tully like bending over and he just literally slingshotted him head first into the cage, which I thought was pretty badass. Yeah, Animal was a good selection for number 2 for the faces for sure.
For sure. You got to really just let him emphasize who Animal is and highlight it with those two good bumpers with Arn and Tully, of course. I just thought it was perfect. Fantastic timing. And then boom, your boy comes in. Everyone's boy. Flair's up next, comes in, wooing away. And what do you know? He's right after Dusty's leg, just like a script would call for, just like it's the regular day. Right after Dusty's legs, wants to weaken that man's leg, because that's what Ric Flair does.
Well, and not only that, though, he comes in and immediately chops Animal and Dusty, and literally you could hear it echo throughout the whole damn Omni over the crowd, which was fantastic, right? And then, to your point, he goes after the leg, which, again, that's why I like this, is because there's story upon story about the match and how they play it out. So I like that a lot.
Very layered, for sure.
Yep.
Nikita splitting up the World Warriors is decent. I thought he was cool. The double clothesline spot on the Brain Busters was good. What'd you think of Nikita?
I love Nikita for me is kind of hit and miss. Nikita, he's not that good in the ring. He's been around now for about 3 years. He's still pretty green, to be honest with you. But you know what? He's basically a one-man show when he comes in, like with the double sickle. And then, the other thing, what I thought was great is Flair basically dove into the other ring to avoid Nikita.
Yeah.
It was great. Like the thing of Nikita's that's really good is he's built as a monster, right? And so you get the monster spots from him, but if you're looking for for a really good technical wrestling match, you're not going to get it from him. So this environment is perfect for him.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah. And I thought the environment for this next guy was even better. A young Lex Luger. I don't know if I'm on a Luger kick, but man, I thought he looked the most impressive coming in with the mix of athleticism and power. I just fucking dug him. You know what I mean?
So here's what's cool. So I don't know if you know this. Luger he might be less than a year into his first year as a wrestler in this.
Yeah.
And he joined the Horsemen about 6 months into his career. He was in Florida for a while. But the great thing about this Luger is traditional Luger. We all like Luger noises, right? He always makes noises. Immediately does this, and he power slams the hell out of Nikita the minute he gets in the ring.
I had that as a note. Great.
Yeah, and these guys, and then Nikita eats 2 double pile drivers. And here's the thing about that with the neck is smart. It also plays back to his injury from Nikita, because Nikita had he ate 2 pile drivers, but Nick Murdoch brain busted him on the floor like a couple months ago. So they're playing up the neck injury as well. So again, Dusty's leg, Nikita's neck, really good storytelling there. So
Awesome. Awesome. And then we have Hawk to complete the Road Warriors. Again, another trip. These guys are not really used to the double rings, perhaps. And what do you think of Hawk jumping in here?
Listen, he just came in, he beat up all the heels, and he particularly just blew Lex Luger up, which was also really good. I mean, listen, big men who can't wrestle and do technical matches in this environment, dude, what else do you want? Just beat the fuck out of people.
I know we're not in New York, but I felt like Hawk's hot tag into the War Games was on Titan Time, and they were trying to get to the end of it. It just felt like it was so goddamn fast. He was
Maybe.
in there, but
Possible.
they were in there, and then we got the 15-second warning like instantly. I felt like.
Well, they might have fast forwarded. Sometimes when they do these matches and you watch them, they do play with it a little bit to kind
It looks like a rumble.
yeah, exactly.
I'm not gonna lie. When JJ came in next year, I thought the punches looked kind of good. The stiff chop and the punch. I'm like, okay, JJ, I see you. I love the no-sell by Hawk because it makes sense, but I thought the no-sell was a little more impressive. Dude, the JJ kind of throwing his hips into this and making it look pretty decent.
Well, JJ used to be a wrestler. I mean,
yeah,
obviously he's not a wrestler now in this, but I guess that's the only downside to this match for me is like when you put JJ and Paul in it, kind of foretells you what the ending's going to be a little bit because one of them is going to eat the shit. But I didn't care. I think to your point, JJ showed well. What I loved is he made the mistake of going in the cage and he went right after Hulk, which I mean, talk about balls on this guy, right?
Yeah.
And it literally, and then Ellering comes in and like it doesn't take any time for JJ to be bloody. Like he was bloody like within the first couple minutes of the match.
That's long gray hair. It's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, so listen, JJ, they both played their roles well. JJ and Paul coming in, they played their roles well for sure. And I thought they added to the match. And typically, you worry about managers being in this environment. Okay, it might foretell the ending, but do they do their part? And I would think both of them did a really good job in terms of what they did in this match.
And when Ellering comes in, he goes right for JJ. You know what I mean? So,
and that's the way it should be, right? You go
absolutely.
Manager on manager. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And we get the infamous, the match beyond must end in submission or surrender. And the War Games is on. And I did do the other one from 1987, and I felt this one was much, much better from when the match beyond actually happened.
So the other one from 87 was the one with the big boss man in a mask, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a little better. And you would think, big boss man in a mask could be a better actual match because he knows what he's doing. But I think for this one, for me, you have all the players that should be in this. They got JJ who manages a horseman. You got Ellering. I don't care. You can add some mask dude, but when it doesn't really have any context to the feud for me, it takes away from it. Yeah, for sure. But do you want to talk about the ending of this as we get into this?
Yeah. So they kind of what the baby faces do is they kind of there's two rings and they kind of isolate the four horsemen the best they can and to keep JJ alone so they can get him to surrender or submit. So Hawk perches up JJ right on his little shoulder and he's kind of like holding him like an infant, right?
Yeah. So this is where the cage kind of comes into play. You talked about how short the cage was, right? So Hawk goes up the Doomsday device, but it's kind of like a minuscule Doomsday device because Hawk has to hold him a certain way, or Animal does. And then so Hawk comes off, and then JJ lands on his shoulder.
Is that the spot where he hurts it?
So that's a legit spot. He did hurt it for real. So not surprising because if you watch the way he landed, it looked pretty brutal. And JJ taking that bump is sick. Like for him to actually say, I'm going to do that bump, I'm sure he didn't plan on hurting his shoulder, but that's amazing. And so for the end of this, obviously it comes in with his shoulder. The only downside for me on the ending, I loved how it was set up. I love what they did. And I love they went after JJ. But when you go back and you look at the ending, it's just Hawk basically stepping on his throat. And they said, the match is over. The match is over. So if he was legit hurt, I get why. But like I would want something more like Savage where he's just like yanking on the arm after you landed on it. But I guess I understand why they didn't do that here. So I think the ending felt kind of flat. So
they introduced the spike. I think Flair was messing around with the spike in the middle.
Oh yeah, he was running around and hitting everyone with the spike, which was great. Yeah.
And then in about 2 to 3 weeks later, when they go in the middle of August, the spike is in the boss man's face and he surrenders with the eye and the mask and everything.
Yeah.
So they introduced the spike here, but it wasn't really a part of the finish. I wonder if it was going to be, but JJ was like, fuck this shit, guys. Go home.
That's kind of what I thought. I was like, okay, I think it would have been I think the ending, that was setting up the ending. I don't think that was going to be the actual ending. I think they just didn't have a choice because he was injured at that point. So, So that fell a little flat. So that might take a little bit of a star off for me.
Yeah, but a little bit, if we're going to nitpick.
No,
You know, as we're here, is there anything you would like to add to this match before we kind of get into the nuts and the bolts of it?
No. I mean, I already talked about. There's a lot of reasons why this one would be my top one, which we'll get into it a little bit here in a minute. And I would go with Chad on 475. I did that take a little bit off. That's why I missed the 0.25 off of the 5 because of the finish a little bit for me. And that's probably being a pain in the ass and just being kind of, I don't know, petty about it. But it did a little bit for me. But the match overall is just amazing. So.
And I agree, 4.75, but it would be a high scale 4.75.
Oh, 100%. It's not like a gentleman 475. It's a definite,
for sure. I just didn't feel that, like, for me to go 5, I get real stigent. So for me to go 5, I just have to say it instantly. And if I have any inkling of going down, I tend to go down. I don't know why. That's just kind of how my personality
I'm kind of
is.
the same way too, and sometimes I get called shit taker for it, but that's the way it is.
But I thought this was excellent. I thought this. I haven't watched the Squadron match in a while, but I felt overall compared to the build, how they set the table, even have you have a very depth knowledge in this era. I have a very limited outskirts. I know what's going on. I know what the feuds are, but you're so in the weeds, and I'm just kind of looking from the grassy knolls or whatever. But I still thought it built up for the first one. I thought it lived up to the hype.
You know, it's funny you say that. So yeah, I'm really big in this era, but I'm also pretty in depth with what's going on in the number one too, because I did a whole freaking pod about it, right? So that was how the whole thing with that was. I wanted to see the build to the War Games. That's kind of the crescendo at the end of the Dangerous Alliance. Well, I'm going to spoil it, but anyway, that's why I went that route. And then, so if you think about build context, the build context shifted the narrative of which one I like. If you want to go by pure match, the number one match is probably the better match. As far as the whole enchilada or the whole like thing, this one for me is 100% number one. So
this is also a harder time for WCW/Crockett.
It is a much hotter time, and it's again the culmination. But this is kind of like 87 is an interesting year, and as they get into 87 into 88 is when they start kind of faltering with Dusty booking a little bit, and then by the end of 88, Turner buys them. So this one's kind of this is kind of a moment in time that is historic for a lot of reasons. This would probably be for me the official kind of like end to the whole Dusty versus Horseman feud that's been building for years and years and years, and that's why for me it's so big and such a big deal as a personal fan of Crockett.
So where would you put 91? We had that yesterday at number 3.
91's really good. I would probably have 91 probably pretty similar. I think the match itself is good. I think Pillman is a standout in that match. The ending is phenomenal, the way it should have done. They kept El Gigante just in there to run in to make sure he was okay. Kept him out of the match because he's really big in 91. If he had been in that War Games in 91, it probably would have been a shit show. But yeah, I like 91 quite a bit. It's one of my favorites.
Cool. All right, so we did pretty good. If if this is your first time checking this out, you have 23 other reviews to go check out. Tomorrow being number 1 on Thanksgiving night. But Shawn, as we get out of here, is there anything you'd like to plug, say, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, just one, thanks for having me on. This is like one of my favorite all-time matches, so getting to talk about it's great. Secondly, yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is from a podcast standpoint on North-South, check out Territorial. That's the main pod that I do, where I kind of the same thing here. You go back into the territories, and I pick a feud or match that maybe not a lot of people have heard or about or have watched, and I kind of go through the history of it. I pull some audio tapes, so you got some audio clips in there as well. So that's a really fun one to do. Comes out once a month, and then I do Linking Up Luchas with Logan and Scott and Jenny and Jake, where we look at Lucha Underground. So that's a lot of fun. Talk about guardrail to guardrail, territories and Lucha Underground, but they're both a lot of fun to do.
Two different ends of the spectrum. But Shawn, what'd you think of your video debut, buddy?
It was good. I mean, the topic's great. Host is good. I enjoyed it.
Shawn, Merry Christmas. I know that's near and dear to your heart, buddy.
Well, it's Thanksgiving, but yeah, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Shawn, we'll see you on the next one, buddy.
All right. See you, Ryan.